Hello, Chickchang back here with part 3 of Halo Oblivion. This will finish up the summary of the story and get us on to the next, so without further delay, let's begin. We begin with John, Fred, and Linda getting to about 500 meters away from the Wheatley. Not hearing any defense turrets firing, Fred had a weird feeling. They were only able to hear scattered plasma fire and microwave bursts from the spider machines. They move up and notice bodies from the destroyed vehicles from the battle earlier, before them and the castaways arrived. The Spartans engage the elites, killing them all, and then John confronts the castaways, where he meets Roselle and Samson for the first time. John tries to get them to stay out of the way, and in return, they will get him off the planet. But once again, they aren't too sure they want their help. Mistrust of the UNSC is strong. Finally, they agree in the end, but the Spartans have more problems than just the castaways. Without Kelly, one of the Spartans will be alone since there are two targets: the Wheatley survivors that are being chased by the Covenant, and the Lucky Break. John then decides to try and recruit the kids to help. Ironically, Samson and Roselle are both older than the Spartans, so not all of them are actually kids. It's just easier to differentiate. Anyways, the cast-off leaders figure out that they can spicing up their deal since helping is more dangerous than staying out of the way. After negotiating back and forth, John agrees to get them a sharp fin ship and relocation to any planet they wish, even insurrectionist ones. John technically doesn't have the power to actually make any of that happen, but he will do his best. Besides, the mission always comes first. They all agree, and Linda goes with the kids after the Wheatley survivors, while Fred and John will go after the Lucky Break. Back with Blue Force, Petrov is with Kukyuk, and they see a vehicle heading towards them. Both think that they are potentially hallucinating until they realize they both see it. That is Kelly driving the Umbra back to them. The odd thing is the little girl that's riding with her. They heard about the potential castaways, but didn't expect to really see any. After Kelly arrives, Petrov gets a sitrep and learns partially what had happened leading up to this point. But because of the heat, she's having issues digesting everything. She calls everyone down to board, which leads to arguments amongst the Marines and the crew. Petrov then states that it's not a taxi ride, so only Marines need to be boarding. Things seem a bit worse than she realizes, since there are only 20 spots in the back with the 2 in the cockpit, 4 of which are already occupied in total by Kelly and the 3 castoffs. Petrov tries to get the kids off, but they refuse to leave, stating that because they helped Kelly capture it, they shouldn't have to leave. Which is fair. I see why Petrov would rather have Marines in their space, but Kelly hints that it would be better to take them with him, probably because of the other castoffs. Eventually, she goes with what Kelly insists on, and they fill up the ship before heading back to help out Blue Team. John and Fred rode with the castoffs as well for a bit because both objectives were sort of in the same direction. Along the way, they see many casualties. Some were Oni personnel, but most were engineers or something of the sort. The only armored quote-unquote soldier was a fat security guard. This causes John to think about the role of Spartans. Being treated as movable chess pieces was not the way that they were going to win the war. They had to be included in all plans and preparations. That's what created the victory during Silent Storm. Once they reached the ravine where the elites had crossed with zip lines, John and Fred fire across to see if any return fire happens. Nothing. So they crossed the ravine as well, and started crawling on their hands and knees toward the objective. They traveled 3 kilometers in 45 minutes that way, which could not have been comfortable. But just when they start thinking, so far so good, the ship just up and takes off. They stared confused for a second, but then this just seems to confirm John's theory. The ship was a trap for the Spartans. If it was able to just take off like that, it wasn't disabled to begin with. They make a mad dash back towards the gorge where they had come from, trying to get to some sort of cover before the Covenant transport from behind shows up. They see one of the transports at the Wheatley, probably trying to figure out what was going on. Just then, 10 Banshees come flying in for a strafing run on the 2 Spartans. They avoid the strafe, with Fred launching a rocket at the middle of the pack, destroying one of the Banshees, while the others flee to regroup for another run. Since their location was found, John didn't see the point of trying to stay quiet anymore, so he asked for help from anyone that could. Just then, the task force sent Echo Squadron, which arrived 2 minutes later to decimate the Banshees. Petrov also chimes in over the channel, stating that their transport is a friendly captured ship, which John is happy to learn. They also learn that the new Covenant flotilla and Stealth flotilla had exchanged fire. Unfortunately, that didn't cause any let-up for the task force up above. They were going to only last a maximum of another 4 hours. John acknowledges and then fills in Petrov about what happened with the Lucky Break. She acts like they let it get away, which causes Fred to lose it a little bit. She tries to tell him that it's not a time to be insubordinate, which I found odd since she's not in charge on the ground. And in the past, the Spartans under John report to him. Only John directly reports to higher authorities unless in odd circumstances. John comes to Fred's defense, claiming it's not insubordination. They couldn't get close enough for the grappling hooks. Then she realized that she probably deserved the response she got, which nobody corrects. She then asks what the odds are of them still capturing the ship, and John tells her that there is always hope, but it wasn't looking good. She at this point states that it's probably time to just evac them. No sense in wasting resources on a mission that cannot be completed. John agrees, but they can't just up and pick up because they need to get the Wheatley survivors and Linda with the cast-offs. Petrov asks if Linda could just extract alone, which stuns John. He couldn't believe that she just suggested that. Just then, the enemy transport was coming up from behind them, and both John and Fred sent it crashing with rockets and BR-55 fire. Petrov, who wasn't privy to the combat they were just in, asks if he is going to answer her. He asks if she's ordering him to abandon the cast-offs and the UNSC crew of the Wheatley. She says no, since John's obviously in charge, and he's happy to hear that. However, she claims that he won't be a leader for long if he risks the Spartans' lives unnecessarily. He says it'll take his chances, which prompts her to tell him that would be a mistake, son. Oof, she did it. She tells him that it's his call in the end, and he tells her that, once again, he's happy to hear that. But then he tells her to never call him son again. Nizat is going over the plan for attack on the humans to plant the beacons, nominating a huge Sangheili named Gree Wakulzi to take the energy shield armor into battle and die fighting. Nizat would stay close to make sure he dies in battle, that way the plan can still work. The plan is to attack, inflict damage, and when Wakulzi dies, they retreat, making it look like they lost hope when their leader was killed. Then Nizat gets word from the Lucky Break, stating that they had to move locations because of the Banshees from the fleet of Swift Justice. At first, Nizat was frustrated, but then he takes a deep breath and commemorates the shipmaster for not losing the ship. Nizat further asks about the Banshees, and he's told that the demons destroyed them. Well, in some sort of fighter craft, because whatever destroyed the Banshees disappeared right afterwards. And the demons were heading towards Nizat and the rest of the ground forces. But Nizat smiles. He believes now that the Spartans were not sent to stop him, but to stop the Silent Shadow by his gods. Now with Linda. She's nested up high on the plateau's edge as overwatch for the Wheatley crew who were set up to defend against the Covenant advance. Linda marks targets while she converses with Roselle. Roselle, not used to fighting this way, was getting very antsy, wanting to start fighting already, but Linda tells her the longer that they have to scan and mark targets, the better. Roselle asks what the war is even about, and Linda only knows that the Covenant want to destroy the humans. It is the will of their gods. She doesn't really know what drives the aliens to do it, and Roselle seems to think that the UNSC did something to them first, causing the war. Obviously BS, but again, insurrectionist ties. When Linda tells Roselle that that's not what it is, she thinks that Linda must be in on it too then. We can see where this conversation goes. Eventually, Linda sees targets in active camo preparing to attack and opens fire. After killing multiple targets, an earthquake seems to have started, causing Linda and Roselle to be unable to hear each other. Turns out the engineers of the Wheatley created a trap to kill the Covenant on entry. Unfortunately, it was a bit premature, but given the circumstances, there was no way for them to know. Linda tells Roselle to get back to Samson, who was in back lying in ambush, just in case the aliens decide to try and counterattack. Before she leaves, Linda asks how old she is. Unable to actually give, the years, she just states that she's had 6 kids. However, only 2 are still alive. Linda tells her that she will do all she can to make sure that they survive. After Roselle leaves, Linda comms Wheatley actual, which just so happens to be Captain Dakani. He thanks her for her shooting. After all, they didn't see the attack coming. Linda tells him that with the rock slide they caused, they won the first fight. But there's more to come, so Linda walks him through how they will survive. The 2 warthogs they have are the biggest threat to the Covenant advance, so they should open fire as soon as they see the aliens. Shooting 500 rounds per minute, it would only take 8 minutes to run out of ammo. But luckily, it wouldn't come to that. Then have everyone who can hold a weapon dig a shallow hole, lay in it, and fire on the elites when they are about 50 paces away because none of them are very good shooters, so hitting targets will be much more likely the closer they get. Also, Linda warns him to get away from the warthogs because being such a high priority target and him being the commander, it would be bad for him to get killed. On cue, 3 marksmen aim their focus rifles on one of the warthogs, destroying it and killing the gunner. Linda moves toward the marksmen, launching a grenade into their midst, then killing each of them with headshots. Linda then goes all over the battlefield, lobbing grenades and killing high priority targets, or at least those that she thinks are high priority, to try and help defend. 7 minutes pass before the other warthog is destroyed, which is a hell of a lot better than Linda could have expected. Just then she sees friendly designators coming from behind her. Samson and his runner with the other castoffs, not seeing Roselle, which is good because it would be better for her to stay safe just in case Samson is killed. She runs toward them and jumps in, calling them to make a hole. After a fun conversation, Samson does tell her that he saw the transport with Kelly coming in behind them. Help was on the way. From within the runner, she opens fire on the seemingly special elite with better shielding. Oh, wonder who that is. She empties the magazine into him, but because of the higher energy shield, it doesn't go down. The castoffs launch all their grenades into the elites, killing many of them and dropping the shields on the big elite. Linda is then able to finish him off with 2 bursts from her rifle. She disembarks from the runner heading towards the Wheatley survivors, noticing that the Covenant didn't seem to care much about being killed from behind, as they escaped. She reaches a point where an elite is trying to get free of 2 soldiers to kill a gray-haired woman. 4 elites are surrounding them to make sure nobody else intervenes, but surely enough, Linda does. She throws a grenade in and takes out the elites, but the gray-haired woman was fine for the most part, after going somewhat toe-to-toe with the elite. But turns out she's Oni, and in charge now since Dakani had been killed when standing too close to the warthogs. And she wants Linda to help her get the elite that was killed with the heavy shielding. Oh no. they're falling for the bait. John and the rest of Blue Team, minus Linda of course, are on their way to Linda to pick everyone up to prepare for evac. Seeing smoke in the air, it wasn't a good look to John. Things must have taken a turn for the worse. They are hauling through, making sure to avoid getting attacked, when they come up on a cast-off mountain runner. Roselle just so happens to be there, and John talks with her about what's going on. She says the smoke is just from their steamers, so they must have won the battle. John agrees, but then states that they should probably stay back a little bit because no matter who won, it's going to be bloody. No sense exposing the children to that kind of harshness. When back on board the Umbra, John tries to calm Linda again, and she responds immediately, letting them know that she obviously is still alive, and what they have as far as vehicles and resources. With only 3 total mountain runners and the Umbra, assuring each runner can hold about 6 people, that only leaves 40 spaces. There were a total of 69 people, including the cast-offs and Wheatley crew. When they land, John has Lena, Arnie, and Oscar go find Roselle to see what she wants them to do, tells First Platoon to set up a perimeter, and then the rest help out with the evacuation. Linda, along with the Oni captain, Stockin, come to John, and Stockin confirms that John is in charge. When he does, she claims that he will be helping the entire human race if they can get the armor and shield generator back to HQ. John nods and tells her that they will just need to get tools in order to remove it from the dead elite. But this is not what Stockin wants. Because of the lack of intel and how to use the technology, they don't want to risk destroying any of it, since after all, they don't understand how anything works. So they will need to take it how it is, still on the dead elite. John tells her that they don't have the transport space for it. They are already 17 people over capacity. And I know this seems kind of odd based on the math from before, when it would actually be 29. But he does estimate possibly that more could fit in the runners, so that's probably where he gets that. But before Stockin can respond, good old Petrov shows up and tells him that that's incorrect. There are 21 cast-offs that are not UNSC personnel, so they still have plenty of room. John asks her if she wants to leave them behind, and she tells them that they obviously already know how to survive here, so they could be a forward operating base for the UNSC until they could come back to get them. Plus, the shield generator was number 5 on Oni's list of tech to get their hands on. John tells Stockin he will do what he can to get the shield on board, and Petrov states that maybe they could have a successful mission after all. John in his head already knows that she really only cares about her career at this point, which to be fair, Petrov has kind of screwed things up since getting to Netherot. John calls Kelly over and tells Stockin that she will do what she can to help get the unit ready for transport, but don't be too greedy since soldiers will walk so the tech can ride. Stockin understands and thanks him. He then starts heading towards Linda with Petrov walking beside him. She thought that they were just going to leave the cast-offs behind, but John tells her that he only agreed to transport the shield unit. Leaving the cast-off behind was not the way to achieve that. He thinks it goes against the Uniform Code of Military Justice, waiting for it to be read to him on his HUD, but nothing shows up. He continues. Either that or the Colonial Administration Authority laws of deep space. Once again, nothing shows up. Or something, he finishes. So clearly they legally could just abandon the cast-offs on the planet, even after all they did to make sure that they even got to this point. But John doesn't care. He refuses to do something like that. Roselle shows up, and the conversation gets really tense. Roselle asks about extraction since they held up their end of the bargain, and John tells her that they're going back to the Wheatley since it's really the only good option they have. They hadn't really heard from the task force above, but there was still possibility they were still listening for the extraction call, but no guarantee. Petrov tries to scare Roselle out of wanting to leave, which irritates John. It doesn't work after all, and Petrov brings up the fact that making 2 trips would delay the extraction by 2 hours. The task force, if it isn't already destroyed, probably can't last that much longer. Roselle questions why they would need to take 2 trips. They could just remove the coal in the bins of the runners and create space. Making sure they are charged enough for 1 trip, that's all that would be needed. She grabs Petrov and pulls her toward the runner, stating that she can take it because it wasn't in the battle, so the batteries are fresher. The Spartans are suspicious because Roselle isn't that nice. Something must be up, but they decide to let them deal with it since Petrov isn't really that nice either. Linda recounts what had happened in the previous battle, and John is shocked to hear that the elites traveled 30 kilometers across the desert, chasing the crew, attacked once, and then withdrew. And they ran towards where the Lucky Break flew, so they were extracting. If they were not after the Spartans, that means that they got what they wanted from the attack and now were ready to leave. Whatever it was, they couldn't let them leave with it. Obviously not knowing that the Covenant didn't leave anything during their attack. Didn't leave with anything during their attack. They left the beacon to be tracked down later. But John decides that they can't let the Covenant keep whatever they got, so they go after them. Petrov goes with the cast-offs and Wheatley survivors and the runners back to the Wheatley itself, while the Spartans and 1st Platoon went after the aliens. Once closer and reaching a thicket that the elites had gone through, everyone dismounts and heads in on foot. During the adventure through, John realizes that they're probably lying in ambush, so everyone needs to be ready. The plants also seem to be reaching out for them when they get too close and are a pain to cut through, which is good since it's definitely slowing down the Covenant. John radios up to call for a spy line extraction. The task force responds immediately acknowledging the extraction, stating that it will most likely be a hotline extraction. and based on a couple of the Marines' responses, they are not a very fun way to extract. Further confirmed by Fred telling them that they will love it. They push through until John spots some elites in camo and battle erupts. The Spartans in separate groups with the Marines kill Covenant troops until reaching the end of the thicket where they come into a mirage basin. A dropship is coming down, which can potentially cause a horrible situation. On the other side of this engagement, Nizat was in hiding with his troops, seeing the Silent Shadow dropship come down to land. He had hoped that it would cause the humans to flee, but wasn't sure what they would do. He was having issues understanding why the Spartans were chasing him so hard. When fighting at Zoist, they were dangerous but focused, and attacked with purpose and clarity. Nizat saw this as vengeful. He started to worry that maybe they had found the beacons and wanted to get the receiver units, but that was an odd thing to worry about since even if they did figure out how to use the beacons, the receiver units were still on board the Quiet Faith. Lukosi wants to go to battle against the demons, but Nizat steadies him, stating that the gods have sent the Spartans to save them from the Silent Shadow. And what happens next? Rockets from the thicket slam into the dropship, sending it crashing to the ground. Lukosi was shocked at the spectacle while 11 surviving elites of the Silent Shadow had attacked the humans. More rockets fly out with small arms fire, causing shields to fail and elites to fall. Nizat decides that this is the moment to run for the lucky break, while everyone's distracted. Unfortunately for him, they didn't make it all the way to the ship before the last of the Silent Shadow were killed. They were fired upon, but Nizat, Lukosi, and 6 others made it behind the downed troop carrier. The rest of his followers were killed. They go to board their ship, being waved in, but before getting to the ship, Nizat sees a bomber come in and destroy the ship, causing a huge compression wave to knock him into a boulder far away from the blast. Once he's able to get to his feet, after somehow surviving the attack, he sees 3 Sangheili honor guards from High Charity coming towards him. The Helios Ultra tells Nizat that his death will be swift if he can return the beacons. Nizat tells him that he must have one question answered first: which of his ships were still intact? At first, the Ultra refuses to answer, but because the loss of receivers makes the beacons useless, he answers stating that the Silent Truth and Quiet Faith were the only ships still alive. Nizat lies, stating that they were on board 2 other ships that had been destroyed, while in reality, both were still on the Quiet Faith. Nizat readies himself for his death, but the Ultra decides that his punishment will be much worse. Him and his followers will be marooned on the planet. Okay, so from where we left off with Blue Force launching rockets at the dropship, we know what happens from there. They killed all the Silent Shadow, then sent the Marines back to the extraction point while the Spartans pushed on. John and Fred killed 12 of the elites following Nizat, before realizing that there just wasn't enough time before the hotline showed up. So John tells everyone to disengage and run for evac. While running through the thicket, Lucky Break explodes from the bomber, sending him through the air, but he was able to land on his feet. He looks ahead, seeing the Pelican come down and pick them up, and everyone lines up. 4 Spartans and only 7 surviving Marines. Once on board the Pelican, John takes his seat, seeing Roselle and Lena. They talk for a second, but John notices that the alien corpse with the shield generator is on the ship. Stockin praises him for getting it because it could make or break human survival, which they needed something to go their way for once. But he comments on why they would bring such an asset back in order to pick them up. Apparently, one of the Pelicans was shot down on the way to get everybody, and the other 2 were already full. With empty slots on their Pelican and only 20 being able to fit in each of the other 2, that means that some were either left behind or killed. John asks if one of the runners didn't make it, and Roselle says Petrov's didn't. Must have had less of a charge than expected. John looks to her, saying, "You didn't." She acts all innocent, saying, "Didn't what?" They had to unload all the coal to carry the asset. Lena chirps in, saying that it's okay anyways because she volunteered to. Roselle confirms something about a forward operation base that Petrov had mentioned earlier. John looks to the crew chief, who looked angry as well, but confirmed that Petrov's last order was to pick up the Spartans and get the hell out of there. Back in debriefing on the UNSC cruiser Everest, John reports to Vice Admiral Preston Cole and Vice Admiral Michael Stanforth of ONI Section 3. Dr. Halsey is also seated at the very large table. Admiral Cole states that nobody's under threat of losing their career and nobody's at risk of confinement, shooting a smile at Roselle and Samson, who are also seated. But they are just trying to figure out what went wrong with the operation. Before John even has a chance to respond, Halsey jumps in. While operation didn't go as planned, it was clearly a trap for the Spartans. Not true. And they had captured the personal shield generator, something like they had never seen. Cole acknowledges this and looks to John, telling him that he's there to confirm some events that occurred on Netherop. Stanforth, either believing or wanting to believe that they didn't happen, the event in question has to deal with Petrov and the cast-offs. An officer named Lieutenant Stone representing Petrov and the others left behind, and the other officer, Lieutenant Commander Net, representing Roselle and Samson and the cast-offs. Lieutenant Stone asks John if Petrov suggested dipping out without the cast-offs. John says yes. The lieutenant asks what his response was, which is that he thought it would violate some code of the military, which apparently does not apply during an act of war. So Petrov was well within the line to suggest it. John's responses catch the cast-offs off guard. They didn't recognize him until now, and they were shocked to see just a kid in their eyes. Lieutenant Stone then asks if Roselle or any of the others under her care might have heard Petrov ask the question. John says he's unable to know if they were able to hear the conversation. Stone asks if it's possible, but John further described that due to the battle that had been going on, people dying, and the stress of being strafed kinda distracted him from being able to focus on something like that. Roselle was quite a distance up the hill as well, so when he says he doesn't know, that's what he means. Stone tries to push further, but is interrupted by Lieutenant Nett. John answered the question. There was no need to badger him. Good luck with badgering him anyways. Stone states that they need to find out if Petrov was deliberately marooned or not. At this point, Admiral Cole jumps in, stating that she had volunteered. Lieutenant Stone responds, saying that that was before she knew her marooning would be permanent. John was shocked at this revelation. Because of the marooning of Nizat, the Covenant set up orbital mines all around the planet. Now it's Lieutenant Nett's turn to ask some questions. First off, did he order the cast-offs to help Linda with her mission? John says yes. Was the mission successful? Yes again. At great risk to the lives of the cast-offs? John assumes so based on the evidence when he arrived to them. Nett nods and then asks what he had promised in return. Stanforth leans forward, stating that it doesn't matter what the Master Chief promised because he's still in enlisted rank. He has no authority to make promises on behalf of the UNSC. And while based on the last mission and missions beforehand, maybe that should change. Roselle glares at John when hearing this, understandably. Cole looks to John and tells him to answer the question, son. But this time John isn't really annoyed by it. Finally, someone worthy of actually using the term. John says that he promised a sharp fin, which causes Stanforth to freak out, but Cole says that shouldn't be a problem. What else did he promise? What a good man. John says that he promised they would take them to any planet they wanted to live on, even an insurrectionist one. Stanforth freaks out again, but Cole tells him to calm down. It might not be a problem yet. But then Roselle says they want to go to Gao, an insurrectionist planet that's basically in full rebellion. Cole winces and Stanforth mentions that it's also Hector Nyeto's planet. Lieutenant Nett states that that shouldn't change anything then. People on Gao would already know about the Spartan 2 program. Stanforth tries to make it out as if there's been big time advances since Silent Storm, but Lieutenant Nett just kind of shrugs it off. How could people that have been marooned on a planet far away from any modern technology be able to understand anything about the Spartans after being with them for less than a day? Lieutenant Nett then says that maybe Roselle and Samson would be willing to keep their mouths shut if they were asked. Roselle says that they won't say anything about John and the other Spartans as long as John kept his promise. Stanforth doesn't buy it, but Cole looks to John, asking him if they can trust up the cast-offs. John looks to both Roselle and Samson, and they both nod back. Then John looks to Cole, saying that they can be trusted on this, and it's final. Stanforth chirps in again afterwards, stating that the UNSC will come after them if they double-cross the UNSC. But Roselle says if that were true, whoever this Hector Nyeto guy is would be dead. Stanforth laughs and agrees, so the cast-offs had quote-unquote won, thanks to John. And they thank John as they leave and ask if they would come to see him. John says for sure, but not on Gao. The last thing anyone needs right now is another war. In the final part of the epilogue, we see Nizat with his followers, sitting in the dark watching Petrov around a fire. They contemplate attacking her since they are so hungry, but Nizat keeps them in check. They notice the amount of food she has, more than she could possibly carry, so it's possible that there are other allies of hers hiding in the dark as well. So they agree to stay hidden and wait to see what the gods have planned. Lukosi admits that he's starting to feel as if the gods had abandoned them, and Nizat understands and agrees. He feels the same way, so he will prey on it. And that is where we will end with Halo Oblivion. Honestly, of the Halo books I've read, Oblivion is probably the worst, which isn't too much of an insult since I still think it's a decent book, but it's just kind of boring and there's not really any consequences in the end. Of everything, something I always wondered is if the beacons end up even being a problem for the UNSC itself, and I'm not sure it really does. Nizat's plan would have worked if the entire Covenant was on board, but destroying most of Nizat's flotilla would make the survivors unable and unlikely to do anything to fulfill what Nizat's end goal was. And in the end, all it does is help the UNSC get closer to mimicking the shield generators themselves. If you enjoyed the summary, give it a like. Want to see more videos like this? Subscribe. I'll probably summarize Halo Reach and ODST just to get the games caught up as well. The next books I'll probably jump into is the Kilo 5 trilogy. So I'll see you in the next one. Chickchang out.